You lived an entire life before the age of 3. Not a metaphor. A life. You were born into light. You opened your eyes before you understood what eyes were. You heard your mother's voice before you knew it belonged to a person. You tasted food. You cried. You reached. You crawled. You stood on shaking legs. You took your first steps across a room that must have felt as wide as a continent. You said your first word, and the people around you probably stopped everything to hear it. And you remember none of it. Not the room. Not the voice. Not the first step. Not the first time someone held you and whispered your name. There is a locked door at the beginning of your life. Behind it are years that happened to you, shaped you, changed you, and vanished. Most people accept the easy answer. You were too young. Your brain was not ready. It just did not record anything yet. Clean, simple, comforting, wrong. Or at least not nearly strange enough. Because the evidence says your baby brain was not sitting there empty. It was not failing to learn. It was not watching life pass by like a broken camera. It was recording. It was absorbing. It was storing. The memories were there. Then something happened to them. In 1905, Sigmund Freud gave this disappearance a name. Infantile amnesia. The great blank space at the beginning of every human story. That dark zone where your first years should be. For a long time, people assumed babies simply could not form memories. That the infant mind was too soft, too unfinished, too unformed to hold experience. Then the experiments came. In the 1980s, psychologist Carolyn Rovi-Collier at Rutgers University designed a test so simple it almost looked like a nursery game. A baby lay in a crib. Above the crib, a mobile hung. A ribbon connected the baby's ankle to the mobile. When the baby kicked, the mobile moved. First, it was chance. A little kick. A little motion. But the babies learned quickly. Kick the leg, the world responds. Kick again, the shapes dance above you. And they loved it. Then Rovi-Collier brought the same babies back days later. They remembered. The moment they saw the same mobile, they began kicking again. Not randomly. Not slowly relearning from nothing. They knew. Even 2-month-old babies could hold the memory for a couple of days. 6-month-olds could remember for weeks. So the case changed. Babies can learn. Babies can store information. Babies can recall. Which makes the mystery darker. If those memories existed, where did they go? Why can a baby remember a mobile after a few days, but the adult that baby becomes cannot remember the first years of life at all? For decades, scientists circled the missing evidence. The first clue was hidden deep in the brain. There is a small curved structure buried inside you called the hippocampus. It is one of the central machines of memory. When you live through something, a birthday, a conversation, a walk in the rain, a face turning toward you in a doorway, the hippocampus helps bind that experience together. It takes scattered details and makes them into an episode, place, a time, a feeling, a scene you can replay later and say, that happened to me. In adults, the hippocampus works closely with the prefrontal cortex. Together, they help tag memories, store them, retrieve them, and place them into the long story you call your life. But in infants, that system is still under construction. The wiring is unfinished. The bridges between the hippocampus and the cortex are still being built. Key regions, including the dentate gyrus, a gateway for forming new memories, are not fully developed until somewhere around ages 2 to 4. So yes, the baby brain can form short-term memories, can recognize, can learn, can respond. But it struggles to lock those experiences into the kind of long-term, autobiographical storage that survives for decades. That explains part of the disappearance. But only part. Because then, in 2014, 2 neuroscientists in Toronto pushed the story into stranger territory. Sheena Jocelyn and Paul Franklin at the Hospital for Sick Children began with a disturbing possibility. What if your earliest memories were not lost because the brain was too weak? What if they were destroyed because the brain was growing too fast? First, that sounds backwards. Growth sounds good. Growth sounds like building. But in the brain, building can also mean demolition. During the first years of life, your hippocampus produces new neurons at an extraordinary rate. This process is called neurogenesis. It is essential. Those new neurons help wire the circuits you will use for the rest of your life. They are part of how the brain becomes flexible, adaptable, alive. But there is a cost. Every time new neurons are added into an existing circuit, they can disturb what was already there. Imagine a city constantly rebuilding itself. New roads, new tunnels, new buildings, new bridges. But the maps from yesterday stop working. Streets are torn open. Old addresses disappear. Entire neighborhoods are rearranged while people are still living inside them. That may be what happened to your first memories. They were not simply fading. They were being overwritten by construction. Jocelyn and Franklin tested this in mice. When they artificially increased neurogenesis in adult mice, those mice began forgetting things they had already learned. Memories that should have held started slipping away. Then they turned the experiment around. When they slowed neurogenesis in infant mice, the young mice held on to their memories longer than normal. The conclusion was chilling. Your baby brain was not too empty to remember. It was too busy becoming itself. The same explosion of new neurons that built the machinery of your mind also tore through the fragile traces of your earliest life. Your first memories were not lost because no one saved them. They were lost because the place that held them was being rebuilt from the inside. New rooms went up. Old walls came down. And somewhere in that renovation, your beginning disappeared. But the investigation does not end there. Because memory is not just storage. Memory needs a witness. To form an autobiographical memory, the kind where you can look back and say, I was there, you need something that sounds obvious until you realize babies do not begin with it. You need a self. You need to understand that you are a person separate from the world. That the hand reaching outward is your hand. That the face in the mirror belongs to you. That events are not just happening, but happening to someone. To you. Developmental psychologists Mark Howe and Mary Courage argued that this missing self may be one of the critical reasons early memories fail to survive. Before roughly 18 to 24 months, infants do not seem to recognize themselves as distinct individuals in the way older children do. The classic test is almost eerie in its simplicity. A small mark of rouge is placed on a baby's nose. The baby is placed in front of a mirror. Before a certain age, the baby treats the reflection like another child. Interesting, moving, present. But not me. They do not reach for their own nose. They do not understand that the marked face in the glass is theirs. Then, around 18 months or later, something changes. A child sees the mark, reaches up, touches their own face. The mirror stops being another baby. It becomes evidence. That is me. And that moment, the birth of self-recognition, appears close to the earliest period when autobiographical memory begins to take shape. This means something unsettling. You may not remember being a baby partly because, in the way you know yourself now, there was not yet a you to remember it. There was life. There was sensation. There was warmth, hunger, fear, comfort, light, sound. But there may not have been a narrator. No inner voice saying, "This is my mother. This is my room. This is my first step. This belongs to my story." Without that self, experience has nowhere stable to attach. And that raises the question no family photo album wants to answer. The baby in your old pictures. The one with your eyes. Your name. Your body. Is that you? Or is that someone who came before you? Someone who lived in the same skin, heard the same voices, was carried by the same arms, but whose mind was later taken apart and rebuilt neuron by neuron into the person now looking back at the photograph. It is not that the baby was unreal. It is that the bridge between that mind and yours was never fully built. Or maybe it was built, then dismantled before you could cross it. There is still another missing key. Language. Developmental psychologist Catherine Nelson spent years studying how children form lasting memories, and her conclusion cuts deep. Language does not merely describe memory. Language structures it. Before you had words, your life came as raw sensation. The smell of skin, the pressure of a blanket, light on a wall, a hand lifting you, a sound that meant safety before you knew the word mother. A fall, a laugh, a room, a face, all of it real, all of it intense. But without language, those experiences had no skeleton, no frame, no labels, no story. They were water without a container. Once children begin speaking, and especially once adults begin talking with them about the past, memory changes. Remember when we went to the park? Remember when you saw the dog? Remember when you fell and cried? Those conversations do something more powerful than parents realize. They teach the child how to turn life into narrative. They show where events begin and end. They identify the people involved. They attach emotion. They create sequence. First this happened. Then that happened. You felt this. You did that. Words become hooks. Memory hangs on them. Without those hooks, early experience slips away. And this is not only theory. Research has found that the age of a person's earliest memory can vary by culture. In many Western cultures, where parents often ask children questions, narrate experiences, and build personal stories around the child, earliest memories tend to begin around age 3.5. Among the Maori of New Zealand, where oral tradition places strong emphasis on personal history and storytelling, first memories can reach back closer to age 2.5. In some East Asian cultures, where early childhood stories may focus less on the individual self and more on social context, earliest memories often begin later, closer to age 4 or beyond. The culture around you helps decide how far back you can see. Not just your brain, not just your age. The stories people told you helped build the doorway into your past. So now the case file comes together. Why can you not remember your first years? Not because nothing happened. Everything happened. Not because your brain was dead to the world. It was alive, learning, absorbing, changing at a speed you will never experience again. But the hippocampus was still unfinished. The systems for long-term memory had not fully come online. Then, neurogenesis surged through the brain like a renovation crew working without mercy, rewiring circuits and disturbing the fragile memories already there. You had no stable sense of self to anchor the experiences. No inner I strong enough to claim them. And before language, those experiences had no durable structure, no story form, no container. It was not one failure. It was a perfect storm. The machine was recording, but the archive was unstable. The witness had not fully arrived. The building was still under construction. The files had no names. Then the walls moved, and the first version of you disappeared. Every human being carries this same absence. Every person you have ever loved has a black hole at the beginning of their life. Your parents, your friends, the strangers you pass on the street. Every mind begins with a missing chapter. We all woke into existence slowly, after years had already happened. By the time you became able to remember yourself, you had already lived through the most radical transformation of your life. You had already become attached. You had already learned voices. You had already built fears. You had already formed preferences. You had already taken in the emotional weather of the home that raised you. You had already become shaped by things you would never be able to recall. That may be the most haunting part. The years you cannot remember still helped make you. They are gone from memory, but not from influence. They do not return as scenes. They return as tendencies, comforts, reflexes, fears without clear origin, longings you cannot explain, ways your body reacts before your mind understands why. The past did not vanish completely. It just changed form. It moved from memory into structure, from story into wiring, from images into instinct. You do not remember becoming yourself because becoming yourself required destroying the evidence. The brain was not preserving a museum. It was building a person. And to build that person, it had to sacrifice the first witness. That is the strange bargain at the start of every life. You are given a body before you know it is yours. You are given a world before you can name it. You are given love, fear, warmth, hunger, touch, sound, and light. Then the brain uses all of it as raw material. It builds, it rewires, it learns, it erases, And one day, years later, you wake up inside a self that feels like it has always been there. But it has not. Someone came before you, a smaller mind, a wordless witness, a version of you that touched the world before memory could hold it. That version is gone now, not because it failed, because it succeeded. It became the foundation. It disappeared into you. So the reason you cannot remember life before 3 is not simply that your brain was too young. It is that your brain was doing something more important than remembering. It was becoming you. And becoming you required, quite literally, dismantling the person who came before.